All right, welcome everyone. This is class number 4 out of 5. Sorry to have missed last week. I got hit really hard with the flu that was going around, so I was 5 days in bed. Online and in person, one reason to always register for the class is that way we have a record of your participation and we can let you know in advance if something like that's going to happen, so you don't drive all the way down here. And so that's the greatest advantage of registering. Tonight's class is on the alchemy of progressions. So we're going into this whole, we're building up a whole other concept tonight. In the last class I introduced the idea of progressions, which is as the planets move forward, they're stimulating weather conditions in our lives, which attract events and opportunities of a very specific nature, of the nature of the planets involved and the houses involved. So here is from Shakespeare. There some ill planet reigns. I must be patient till the heavens look with an aspect more favorable. No, you couldn't. So, this is from Winter's Tale, Act 2, Scene 1, spoken by Hermione. Progressions are astral weather conditions. Now, in Hermetic astrology, the natal chart is considered to represent the most powerful influences which impact our character, consciousness, and life experiences. I like to look at it as being our spiritual DNA. That it's there, it's encoded, it's a pattern, and it wants to manifest or express itself. From birth forward, the planets are moving, and they create progressed motion in the chart. These progressed aspects create temporary astral weather conditions. As we just talked about, they're impinging upon our subconscious. And what that's doing is it's motivating us to think, feel, and behave in certain ways. Those trends of thoughts, feelings, and actions draw events and experiences. So, calculating our progressions lets us look forward into our lives. And you could look forward as far as you want. So, if we're at the 16 going on 17 end of the perspective, you could push this thing forward 70 years and get a, big... Yes. Said, some of us that may be closer to the other end of that spectrum don't want to look too far ahead. We might get disappointed. But there are advantages. Once you master the art of progressions, being able to plan your life to some degree. I mean, you're not always able to plan the details of your life, but you can see the overall general trends that will be taking place. And knowing that ahead of time gives you actually a lot more power in terms of how you approach those upcoming years. When you plan for the great expansions in your career, when you know your dark periods are going to happen, when you need to be bolstering up your health and things like that, you can determine in advance.
So basically, when is it safe to take a chance?
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, the I Ching talks about now's a good time to cross the great river or the great water, and no need to cross the great water now. So that's a very ancient idea, what you just said.
Yeah, and with the Greeks crossing that great water, you might have to have a coin. And
Well, hey, at least they don't do what the Prussians did at one point when they were fighting the Russians and decided to do battle over a big lake. That was stupid.
An ice
They
lake?
all,
Was
Yeah,
it frozen?
An iced over lake. The Prussians decided to try to fight the Russians on an iced over lake. They all fell in and died.
Well,
Yeah,
that is the
that's a
object of
twist
war,
on the
isn't
Red
it?
Sea. That's the Red Sea in a frozen environment.
All right. So basically, looking forward, we know what the weather's going to be. You know, sunshine or storms. Here's another quote from a favorite. Oh, I missed one. All right. Astrology does not foreshadow events which are inevitable. It maps thought cell activities which influence the thoughts and behavior and exert extra physical power on the environment in such a way as to make certain events probable. That's about as much as you can tell from a progression. You can tell thoughts and behavior, the area of the environment, and what is probable during that period of time. If you're good, and if you're also highly intuitive, then one can sometimes really just spell out events that are coming up. They can describe it with clarity and detail. So basically, the process of progressions is based on the law of attraction, which is like attracts like. And what is attracting all of this is the activities of our astral brain, our subconscious mind, or what we refer to as being the soul. These are temporary states of consciousness through which we may pull in wealth, health, companionship, or we may have poverty, injury, or solitude, as well as numerous other types of activities. But basically, this is due to the stimulus that is going on in our soul or in our subconscious mind at any given period in our life. And those trends of stimulus are mapped out by your progressed aspects. All right, now, what determines, and this is something every astrologer is trying to work out for themselves, is a formula. And that formula is to determine, is there some good stuff coming up ahead of me, or is this going to be problem periods? So the relative conditioning energy of a planet in the natal chart contributes to its ability to attract pleasurable or painful experiences by progressions. That conditioning, and Winnell and I had this conversation at the beginning of the class, is determined by the furthest column marked harmony. The higher the number, the greater the harmony, unless that large number has a minus sign in front of it. Which, yeah. So, one of the things we're looking at, when we're looking at the progressions going on in your chart, what are the planets involved? What do those planets look like in the natal chart? Because that is how they are trained to behave, according to the energy in the natal chart. So it's not always the nature of the aspect by progression that determines whether an event is going to be perceived as favorable or unfavorable, but it's how does that planet carry its energy in the natal chart? Is it a happy camper or is it cranky? Now, again, one of the factors we're always looking at, even by progression, Venus brings a quarter harmony. Jupiter brings 1/2 harmony. Mars is a quarter discord, and Saturn's 1/2 discord. So these are planets that they carry baggage with them. Venus and Jupiter have happy baggage. You know, they've got Monopoly and Chutes and Ladders and cake and cookies and ice cream, and they've got fun stuff in their bag when they show up. It's like the babysitter you really like. The other guys, on the other hand, what is it? It's like, what, frogs and snails and puppy dog tails?
In the case of Jupiter here and Obama's that we just looked at, that very harmonious 32-something Jupiter, is the half harmony factored in when that harmony number is come up with in the astrodynes?
Yes.
That's part of
It's
the
actually factored
figure
into every single aspect.
aspect. Yeah.
So if you look at the aspectarium that comes with your chart, you can look at every aspect formed by every planet in your chart, and you can determine there are 2 lines for each aspect. The upper line, which is the power, and the lower line is the harmony or the discord. Now, again, one of the conversations we had at the pre-class was the nature of aspects. There are some aspects which are more powerful than another, and there are aspects that are more harmonious than others. So one of the things we look at when we're studying progressions is, what's the nature of the aspect? Is it a conjunction? Is it an opposition? Is it a square? Is it a sextile? Is it a semi-sextile? We take that into account, but that only adds a small amount of information to us, because it is telling us what the dynamic is of that particular type of weather that we're under. But again, without knowing the conditioning of the planets involved in the natal chart, we could make huge mistakes in interpretation. Yes, Johanna.
You were saying about Venus and Jupiter harmony.
Mm-hmm.
If they are in detriment or fall, is it still the same? Do they still carry the same harmony?
You have to look at the totals in the Astrodyne report. Remember, detriment and fall have about as much influence as whether your wallpaper is chartreuse or emerald.
What's the difference between chartreuse and emerald?
Well, chartreuse is a bright yellow green, almost an acid green, and emerald is more the color of a living lawn.
So it doesn't really have a lot of influence.
Well, it shades it, right?
It shades it, but it's not that powerful. It just shades it a bit. You know, are you wearing corduroy or denim is sort of the way those essential dignities impact us.
I was wondering about that. Thank you.
But they do factor them in figuring
The total harmony and discord. Yeah.
And if you had a Jupiter with really lousy aspects in your chart, the half harmony might pretty much neutralize the effect of those difficult aspects.
Correct. These aspects, which are the inconjunct, the parallel, and the conjunction, we consider neutral. Now, they vary in strength from one another, from very strong to mild, but they don't bring any conditioning with them. They just determine whether an event happens in a way that's mildly expansive with intensity, or where it's very prominent event in the chart. So, by progressions, conjunctions by progressions are usually huge events in your life. These are things that really stand out in the timeline of your existence. The harmonious aspects are the semi-sextile, sextile, and trine. Of these 3 aspects, they are in ascending order stronger. the trine being the most powerful of the harmonious aspects. And discordant aspects are the semi-square, sesqui-square, the square in opposition. And these two are equal in discord. This is I would say that's a strong discord, and this is highly discordant. So a progressed opposition, even if it's involving your very best planet, which means that with that, there could be good events taking place. The nature of the opposition is to separate. So oftentimes, something good happens to you, but it happens through a loss of some kind. I mean, there are times when people I know have lost their car. Somebody's stolen their car. But, rarely does insurance really cover it. But who knows? The next vehicle they got may have been a better vehicle for them. So that could be the example of an opposition, but involving a really harmonious planet. The event happens as a loss, but something good takes place as the end result.
Christopher, I don't know what a parallel is.
Parallels are measured by declination, and that could be why you don't know them. Some astrologers do not work with parallels because, again, they require a different form of calculation. What declination is the position a planet holds north or south of the celestial equator, which is an extension of the Earth's equator out into space. So all of the other 9 aspects we work with are measured by what is called zodiacal longitude, which means you're starting with 0 degrees of Aries is the first degree, and 360 degrees later is 29 degrees of Pisces. That's a full circle. So all of these aspects, except for these, are measured along that band of the zodiac. However, the parallels are measured by what degree the planet falls north or south of the equator. To give you an example, yesterday the sun went into Aries, and the sun was therefore moving from south declination to north declination. And so right now, the sun is sitting right on the equator, which is why our daytime hours will be the same as the nighttime hours. Come the summer solstice, the sun's going to be 23 degrees north of the equator. So it's going to be setting way over here on the horizon. And that is declination. However, on the winter solstice, the sun's going to be 23 degrees south of the equator, and it's going to be setting way over there on the horizon at that time. So in the course of a year, from the point furthest north to the point furthest south, we can see the sun moving 46 degrees of declination. It's easier to see it at sunrise and sunset, where we can see exactly where on the horizon it's either rising or setting. All of the other planets do the same thing, just depending on the planet, far more slowly. Planet like Pluto is moving at a snail's pace.
The contraparallel is when one planet is above south and another planet is north, but they are on the same degree of declination, within 1 degree.
So that causes the parallel, the north and the south.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
The contraparallel is one is north and one is south, but they are in the same degree of declination.
So you could have Mars at 17 degrees north and Mercury at 17 degrees south, and they're considered in parallel.
The little stripe is through here, the parallel, that's the contraparallel.
Yet the nature is pretty much the same, which is intensity. Parallels just crank up the volume. Here we go, another quote. failure or success seem to have been allotted to men by their stars, but they retain the power of wriggling, of fighting with their star or against it. And in the whole universe, the only really interesting movement is this wriggle. That's E.M. Forrester.
If only we had just one star to fight with.
I know. Feel like the cowardly lion sometimes. Put up your dukes. All right, and Zane says this. Wow. Okay, I've broken this down. The object of the astrologer should be not merely to demonstrate to his client and to the world at large how accurate in every detail his predictions are, but to be as great assistance as possible to his client and to society as a whole. I do not believe the astrologer is ever justified in lying to his client, but it is within his professional jurisdiction how much of what he discerns he will tell. And in what he does tell his client, he has the opportunity, and should use it, to impart advice and information in such a manner that the suggestive power and the thought power of his words shall be constructive and of assistance. The psychological effect of delineations and predictions should always be well weighed in connection with the temperament and the probable reaction of those to whom made before they're given. Easier said than done. But basically, the goal with all of this is to actually help someone. And if you're a loose cannon in your interpretations or can't feel out what the ultimate psychological impact might be on the querent, it may not be such a good idea to be doing this, because sometimes damage can be done. Again, what you have to also add into this equation, that any person who is going to an astrologer may also be placing greater import on the words of that person than they might in terms of their own opinion or their own ability to sway the outcome of their future. So that is the power of suggestion in all of this.
I always remember that phrase I heard, the human mind is 100% suggestible. Even when people want to reject what you've told them, they've still taken it in and have to react or respond or try to bury or do something with that information. So to make it as helpful and empowering as we can, to offer it in as helpful a way is just so important.
You know what that kind of makes me think of? I'm not a Christian, but it makes me think of the whole story of the Garden of Eden. They were told not to eat the fruit, but they did it anyway. I'm pretty sure that if he didn't tell them anything about the fruit, they would have just left it the hell alone.
And please ignore that apple and the talking serpent.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to wonder what the heck is up there. It's like when Dad tells you not to look in the box in his closet. What's in there?
Johanna?
I just wanted to ask a question and share this at the same time. I did a chart for a person one time, and it showed a death by suicide. And they never did come to get their chart read. They went on vacation or something, I don't know, or she just left, but anyway, she committed suicide. How do you handle this? You can't really say, well, you shouldn't, don't go this
This is
path.
what I did. And about 5 years ago, I had 14 friends die in 1 year. The most painful of those losses was a friend who was also a client of mine. And for a 2-week period, she was calling me almost every day. And this is a woman who had suffered her entire lifetime with mental illness and had decided on her own to go off of her medication and start doing homeopathy instead. I think we have to have the freedom to make our own choices medically. And even in terms of our desire to live or die, there is some choice in that, though I do believe there are benefits in the wriggle, as E.M. Forrester said. The only interesting thing in the universe is continuing to fight this thing. And so I spoke to her every day and continually encouraged her. If this is really getting painful or if you're feeling at all self-destructive, I highly recommend you go check yourself into Caseman Hospital here. And I repeated that every day. And then heard, stopped getting calls and heard a few days later that she had hung herself.
Well, her mother this was a young person. The mother had the chart done and never did bring the young lady over to my house to have the chart read. And so then, weeks later I heard that she committed suicide.
Right, and your responsibility in that is limited.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, I was still very saddened and disturbed.
Yeah.
Though one person said to me, perhaps she lived 2 weeks longer because you did speak to her every day. But at the same token, that is something that really bothered me, and I felt that there's nothing I could have done to change that. In this case, the client never even came to you, but they probably would not have been benefited by saying to them, well, it looks like within the month you're going to commit suicide. I don't see, because of the power of suggestion.
I just saw death in the chart. And so it was...
How do you see death?
Well, there's ways.
She's very intuitive.
Yeah, and it's not recommended to tell clients of that. I might make suggestions in certain ways.
I have a couple friends I'm really worried about.
But see, what happened is the parents filed bankruptcy and they moved away, and I could never find and get a hold of them to tell anybody. And so, but it has bothered me like now for 15 years, and so really...
Yeah, the only thing I could say is you need to write a letter to that person, not to mail it to them, but sit down and write it in your heart of hearts, and that way you bring closure for yourself. And
I one time was asked to do a chart with very little, 20 minutes of preparation. I pulled up the Astrodynes and her chart, and this is someone I never met before, and she was a young lady, and she had some difficult emotional aspects. I think it was Moon opposed Neptune and some square Saturn or something like that, that I felt the need to speak to the fact that she probably would experience periods of time in her life when she went through real emotional struggles. And it was like she was given permission to be real with me, to spill her heart, she told me that she'd had suicidal periods, and, I could sit there and nod and acknowledge that this was a pattern, that could be recurrent in her life, so you can call it a pattern, but that if she saw herself through it, this too shall pass. You learn your lessons from the passage of time and the way you grapple with the wiggles. And she went away really grateful for that reading because she could be real. It was important.
I can validate that. I had a very strenuous time in my life with transits or whatever. And it was the first time I'd gone to astrology. And for someone to say, this will be over in 2 or 3 years, it was like, oh, I haven't screwed up myself forever. Or I won't, because when you get in some of those places, you think you're there forever. And I really do think that's the beauty of astrology. If, like Christopher is saying, the environment is all there. You know, it doesn't mean you have to do it, but everything is there to support it when you have some of these progressions that take place. And
Of course, sometimes 2 or 3 years can seem like an interminable.
but to me, it was just a relief.
Yeah, I agree.
The mother of this.
I'm going to redirect the class back to my talking,
Okay.
because we have a lot of information to get through tonight. Okay.
But this is speaking
Me,
to
yeah,
what
me,
you're about to say here, offering
Right.
alternative expression.
you have to be able to do that. And everyone who's practiced will have a story or 2 or 20. And sometimes the benefit of progressions is to know that every aspect has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And as I like to say, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not an oncoming train. Sometimes that is all we get from our progression, is that this too will pass, and it may pass like a kidney stone. But there is an end in sight. Yes?
Do you offer some kind of redeeming value for this happening in their life at that time?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I offer suggestions for change, which is what tonight's class is about. So, you offer alternative expressions for any aspect. Mars conjunct Uranus in the first house could, yes indeed, represent an accident. However, there might be alternative explanations. This could also represent a period in this person's life where they develop a rash, get shingles, where they might become highly independent. They could decide to, join the Symbionese Liberation Army or whatever happens to be the radical equivalent of the decade. So you offer alternative suggestions. And then you offer, how can you work with this during this period of time? Because if this is a Mars-Uranus conjunction in your first house, good chance you're going to be feeling a little itchy on one level or another. And what can you do about that? And that's the process of alchemy. So, and we're going to do a whole conference on alchemy this year in June. But in alchemy, this is an ancient means for looking at the chart using the language of metallurgy. There are different forms of alchemy. There's metallurgy alchemy, and there is spagyrics, which is alchemy used in creating tinctures and from plant material. It uses a whole other set of symbols that are related to the distillation process. But I'm going to talk about metallurgical alchemy, which uses the planets and metals as being symbols of those planets. That is a clump of lead. Here we have tin, iron, copper, quicksilver, silver, and gold. These are the 7 metals of alchemy. And we call the experiences that the planets bring into our lives the ores of alchemy. So we have ores of lead, tin, copper, mercury, silver, and gold, corresponding to each of these metals. Just as each metal has a different property associated with it, it's the same as the planets. Each of the planets expresses differently in our consciousness and bring ores with them, or set types of experiences. The goal of alchemy is transmutation. Trans means to change. To mutate means to change one object into another. So basically, in alchemy, what we are doing is transmuting an ore into purified metal. And the thing we need to think about is the ores of every metal come with pure metal, which we might consider to be the virtue of that planet, but they also come with dross, which is impurities, which we might think of as being the vice of that planet. The ancient alchemists had one objective. Actually, they had a few objectives, but the first and foremost was to transmute all metals into gold, which was considered to be the most purified form of metal, perfection in the physical sense. And it was done in one of two ways, what's called conversions and antidotes. The word conversion comes from the Latin conversio. It means a complete change. Character, form, function. In the process of alchemy, what we are doing is we determine the problem metal in our chart. What's giving us grief? And how do we set about working on that? To convert that metal, what we do is we recondition the feelings associated with that metal to only express harmoniously. Easier said than done. But it can be done.
How? Are you using feelings as the feeling of the individual, or does this mean something else of the alchemy conversion?
It is the emotion, the feelings as in the emotional states that are stimulated within us through the thought processes associated with that planet. As we move along and discuss each of the planets in detail, it'll become clearer to you. But it does require that we look at each planet in detail. Now, antidotes comes to us from both the Latin and Greek, either antidotum or antidotum. This means to give as a remedy against. This is usually something that is disparate from the poison, so to speak, the thing that ails us, but that it is able to counteract the unwanted or the injurious effects of that poison. That is the antidote. So in astrological alchemy, antidotes are metals, which we know as thought cells. We have gold, the thought cells of the sun, power urges. We have silver, the thought cells of domesticity or the moon, so on or so forth. So what we're doing is we are applying different but compatible elements to our thought processes in order to harmonize them. That, too, will become clearer to you as we move along and actually discuss what antidotes are. So, basically, alchemical antidotes happen in pairings. Gold has no antidote. It can only be converted. But the other planets, lead and copper are natural antidotes. Lead being Saturn, copper being Venus. Tin and quicksilver or Mercury are natural antidotes. Tin being Jupiter, quicksilver being Mercury. Iron and silver are natural antidotes, Mars and the moon. No antidote for gold. Curiously, and I've just realized this recently as I started preparing for the conference coming up, is these actually follow an order, which are the planetary days and planetary hours are lined up to put antidotes right next to one another. The moon, silver, and Mars fall next to one another. We have Sunday, Moon Day, Mars Day. If you speak any of the Romance languages other than Portuguese, you'll be able to see the planetary rulers. Then we have Mercury Day, Wednesday, or Woden's Day. We have Jupiter's Day, or Thor's Day, which are right next to one another. And then we have Venus Day, Freya's or Frigga's Day, and then followed by Saturn's Day, in English, the only day of the week that's actually named after the planet to which it corresponds. We use the Nordic equivalents of all the other gods in English. So they are paired together so interestingly in their antidotes. So how do we look at this? Sun progressions. If you're having progressed sun aspects in your chart, these are the things that it's going to influence. Your vital life force, your sense of significance, your relationships with authority figures or the male sex in general, persons you might consider to be father figures. That would include your father, should he be living. And it brings in opportunities in one's life for awards, honor, and recognition. In looking at a chart for progressions, sun progressions last 2 years. You have the date of entry, the first year to when it becomes perfect, and then a year for it to leave orb of aspect. Now, if in your natal chart the sun is harmonious, and let's say by progression it's forming something like a semi-sextile, a sextile, a trine, we're pretty much guaranteed that these are going to be favorable or harmonious sun progressions. So, this is going to be a period in your life where you have leadership opportunities, where you have a lot of energy. It's a time in life where you're commanding the respect of other people, where you're gaining trophies, honors, awards, pats on the back, or hearty handshakes. And the authority figures in your life, you are having positive experiences with them. Now think the opposite of that. If your natal sun is afflicted, and let's say by progression it's forming an opposition, a square, semi, or sesqui square, then chances are this is a time in your life where you're going to be behaving in a prideful, dictative, or egotistic way. With that could be accompanied a loss of honor, a loss of esteem, or you might be having problems with authorities. You know, the policeman pulls you over for the brake light that's not working, and you start picking a fight with them. What happens? You get to sleep it off in jail that night. And you couldn't help yourself. You just rolled down the window and got cranky. Exactly. God, you're clever tonight. Or I was. Okay. What to do under progressed aspects to the sun? Unusual care should be given to dealing with the male sex, to political influences, to the attitude of those above one in station, to things affecting the honor and self-esteem, and especially as affecting the departments of life indicated by the houses in which the sun and the other planet involved in aspect are located. The sun has no natural mental antidote, but the religious thoughts are unusually potent when held in association with the power thoughts. Whatever the thoughts are that are thus selected to be held in the mind at the same time as the thoughts of power, of confidence, and of ability to handle whatever situations arise, they must be held with a glow of enthusiasm. It is their harmony that must be depended upon to counteract the planetary discord being received. So with sun aspects, sometimes if you add a little bit of Jupiter, Jupiter can be feelings of a faith in a higher power, or it can be having a sense of humor about things. If you can be self-effacing to some degree, or just see the cosmic humor in any situation that's affecting your puny ego, then chances are you're going to sail through the experience more unscathed than you might otherwise do. Now, moon progressions. Any progressed aspect of the moon affects our moods, emotional states, mental attitude, home, family, and domestic life, our everyday affairs, relations with the female sex in general, and mother figures. The good news is major progressions of the moon only last 50, 60 days. But one can certainly wreak a lot of havoc with their moods in that amount of time. You know, the interesting thing about feelings is they're not always the most accurate perception of what's going on in our lives. Sometimes they can be spot on, but the thing about our feelings is they tend to be highly conditioned by our life experiences. The pecking order that we grew up in, you know, our role within family, the experiences gained through school and other such things, and or lifetimes of relationships, where oftentimes our feelings can be reactive rather than a actual clear perception of what's going on. Yes?
So it's kind of like whenever a rich person can't afford something and they get really pissy about it, but a poor person can't afford the same thing and they're just like, meh, whatever.
Yeah, it's all it all depends on what your life experience has been. You know, a poor person may be poor when there's no money in their wallet.
Yeah.
For a rich person, they may be poor when they're down to their last million. You know, we all have a different perspective of poverty.
I got $1, I'm rich.
Whoa! So, if you're having positive lunar aspects, this means good things could be happening with your home or your family. You may be brought opportunities in your life. Somebody showed up with a puppy. You get to be caring and nurturing. You might be having heightened intuition, so you want to pay attention to that. And your interactions with women could be positive. If your moon is naturally afflicted, or let's say your progressed aspects are squares, semi-squares, oppositions, then this might be a period in your life where you feel passive, submissive, impressionable. You know, it's the old, the light bulb goes out. Oh, I'll just sit here in the dark. That is a lunar progression.
Do you think we have a tendency to take things too personally when we're undergoing?
What do you mean by that? Yeah. So, under unfavorable progressed aspects involving the moon, the health, contacts with women, relationships with the public, the attitude of mind, and those things indicated by the house position of the moon and the other planet involved in aspect should receive special attention. Harmonious thinking and feeling in general, because the temporary stellar areal having the moon dynamic structure at one terminal is so open to reception, if associated with such feeling of desire and effort to minister to the welfare of others, tends to correct the discord of a progressed aspect involving the moon. But the most effective thoughts and feelings for this purpose are the aggressive type ruled by Mars, which are the natural antidote. Change the damn light bulb. That's the urges of Mars. You know, you decide to take action. I've read studies that an hour of vigorous walking a day is as effective as Paxil or whatever they're pushing these days for antidepressants. Whatever, you know, whichever one you're on, you could get out and walk for an hour vigorously and have perhaps a better effect. Why? Because you're moving from the passivity of the moon, which is, I can't do anything about this, to taking action. And the act of being physically active puts you in an aggressive Mars state. It puts you in an assertive state where you're saying, if nothing else, I can put one foot in front of the other. I can still walk.
Do that every morning.
So, is this possibly why whenever I'm just sitting at home alone, I tend to just curl up on my laptop and just type away crying? And whenever I'm outside with my friends, I end up exhausting the heck out of them. Like I'm jumping all over things and climbing on people and running around like an idiot. But in one, I'm just completely just...
Yeah, one is a passive state of being and the other is an active state of being. One tends more towards despondency and depression, and the other tends more to elation and feeling more vital.
We should all see Silver Linings Playbook.
But my mom is kind of the opposite, though. She gets really cranky if you make her get up.
Right, but my guess, if you made her get up and walk for an hour,
Right.
she'd feel better for having done it, and she might still be cranky.
How much her feet hurt. My back hurts, my feet hurt.
Right, but after about 90 days, she might be in a better place.
I can honestly say, with cancer rising, I have been a runner for 36 years, and that has saved me. It really has. Because you can get in that rut, where you're spinning, rut, yeah. Yeah. It's been the best thing that ever happened.
Any progressed aspect of Mercury affects our studies, mental interest, increases our writing and intellectual activity, accuracy in calculations and memory, and attracts opportunities for communication and self-expression. And there probably should be some punctuation in there somewhere. Major progressions of Mercury last for approximately 18 months. So if your natal Mercury is harmonious, if you're having good progressions, you're going to have opportunities to express your intelligence. Maybe a time where you're particularly perceptive. Your communications with others can be constructive. You might go through a time of being reflective, analytical, evaluating, and exercising logic and reasoning. If it's afflicted, however, you could go through a time of being critical. Your communication skills might qualify as poor. You could make errors in calculation. You could experience nervousness, anxiety, neuroses, mental ruminations, and forgetfulness. Yes?
If your Mercury or any planet is harmonious, and then you have a tough progression, that will affect the natural harmony of it, right?
It will, but again, keep in mind that the natal conditioning is usually stronger than the progression. So, if the natal Mercury is harmonious, even though it's involved in an opposition, you may forget something, but it could be a good thing. I just blanked out my childhood.
Is intercepted.
Then if Mercury is intercepted in your chart, there's a very good chance it's going to be a weaker planet in the chart. All right, so Zane says, under an unfavorable progression involving Mercury, only thoughts should be permitted which are pleasant and which move forward to some purpose. Clerical and other errors and slight mistakes should be guarded against, and a special care should be exercised as to the exact purport of any document which is signed. What is said to others also may be subject to misinterpretation. Don't sign away the deed to your house, your car title, future earnings on your novel, things like that. Actually read the papers you're signing.
But they're impossible.
It just takes time.
5 pages of legal shit.
Got to watch your language in here because this is being broadcast on the internet. That's an afflicted Mercury. Potty mouth.
Well, in that case, Mercury is afflicted all the time.
It's a habit system. The natural antidote, and thus the best type of thoughts to associate with the intellectual activities at such a time, are religious thoughts. This does not signify one must turn to religion, but the optimism and confidence of Jupiter that all will work out as desired should be cultivated. The reliance on a higher power than human intelligence, after human intelligence has done its best, is an attitude which adds harmony to the thought cells influenced by Mercury in the most potent form. In other words, God helps those that help themselves. You have to try first, but then you also bring in this sense of confidence that, there is an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-present deific force that isn't out there looking to punish me, and that if I can enlist the aid of that infinite mind, it can help me with my puny little finite mind. Venus progressions. Any progressed aspect of Venus attracts friendship and socializing, affection or romantic opportunities, gratuities, gifts, pleasure, experiences with beauty and the arts. Like Mercury, progressions of Venus last 18 months. So, if Venus is harmonious in your natal chart, or you're having a sextile, a trine to Venus, there's a good chance that you'll be experiencing heightened creativity. Love opportunities, gifts and gratuities, increased cultural interest, and life just happens with greater ease. On the other hand, if your Venus is discordant, this might be a time where you're experiencing a loss of love. Your friends could be disappointing to you. You might be having creative blocks, also known as laziness, and or going through a period of over-sensuality. You know, instead of having a spoon of the Haagen-Dazs, you indulge in the entire pint. So,
What's wrong with that?
yeah, ask your physician. So, under an unfavorable progression involving Venus, slights, either real or fancied, are apt to arise. Perhaps events over which no one seems to have any control will, for the time being, cause conditions that stir up grief and emotion. The less attention the individual pays to slights during such a period, the better. Whether intentional or not, and whether caused by unavoidable conditions or not, the discords of Venus thrive on emotional perturbation. Have you ever been perturbed? Well, perturbation is the state of being continually perturbed. Yes, back in the 50s, we were perturbed a lot. People don't use that word very much anymore.
I've never even heard it before.
Right. Well, you'll expand your vocabulary in this class, young lady. The best procedure, therefore, is to invoke the aid of the safety thoughts ruled by Saturn, and also sufficient of the power thoughts ruled by the Sun. The reason for this is both Venus and Saturn can be a bit passive. So when you bring in power thought cells, it adds a little chunk of vitality to the mix. And
Christopher, I'm thinking of, when you're describing these as unfavorable and favorable, but say, I don't know, somebody has their natal Venus being squared by Jupiter, progressed Jupiter. Is that necessarily unfavorable? I mean, the square is, but Jupiter is a pretty optimistic planet.
so chances are, and if Jupiter, if both planets are harmonious in the natal chart, that the square, the nature of the square, which we want to think of as just bringing obstacles, may not be. It could actually be a blessing that comes about. But nevertheless, it is a square aspect, so there could be a hurdle that has to be leaped in the process. So, for example, a square from Jupiter can be too much of a good thing. You have 10 friends that want to go home with you in your VW Bug. So unless it's actually a small touring van.
No, you just put a couple people at the feet of the other people and a few laying on top of more people and then pile some on top of them and maybe throw someone in the trunk.
And
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
hope you don't get stopped.
That's the other side.
The safety thoughts,
Human trafficking.
which give a cold appraisal of circumstances and are under the dominion of reason and quite apart from emotion, are the natural antidote for the social thoughts of Venus. That is, they enter into the social thought cells in the astral body most readily in the formation of a highly beneficial compound. and the realization that the less emotion permitted, the less misfortune will be experienced, is an easy way to apply these safety thoughts. Pleasure should be felt in this conquest of emotion by cold reason. Sounds a little dry, but, you know.
It reminds me of, to use your language, that the precedent has been set. A great spiritual teacher of mine used to say, human emotion, it's like a bucket of shit. More you stir it, more it stinks.
Right, and it takes cold evaluation to just step back from that. You know, the fact that you weren't invited to someone's party might just be that. They could only have 12 people. You weren't on the list.
Or they just forgot about your existence.
They forgot about your existence. And that doesn't mean your existence isn't important to the creator of the universe. It just wasn't important to them. So it's a matter of putting things in the proper perspective.
Remembering not to take things personally can be very helpful.
This,
Much less not to stir our own bucket.
Or you just say, oh, well, you're an a-hole, and then walk away.
That can be a release as well.
all right, that would be if you're having a Mars progression. Because progressions involving Mars express through courage, passion, strife, antagonism, and effort. Major progressions of Mars last 3 to 4 years, depending on how fast Mars is moving in your chart. So, if you're having positive expressions, let's say progress Jupiter's trining Mars, you might be showing initiative, energy, passion, courage, defense, constructive effort, and building things up in your life. Oh, I think I'll just go put up a tool shed this weekend. And
I have those kind of ideas all the time. We used to do this today.
Well,
And then you just
Lost.
procrastinate.
No.
now, let's say it's being afflicted. This could be a time where you're having impulsiveness, lust, anger, strife, destruction, aggression, accidents and injuries, or fevers. Anything when it comes to health matters, Mars is anything that ends in itis. It's an inflammation. Mars is angry. It's red, it's hot. Anything that ends in an osis is Saturn, which is a chronic complaint. Saturn is stuff that lasts for a long time, and it's usually the result of some kind of deficiency or things that have become stagnated in some way. So Zane says, haste, impulse, and too great activity should be guarded against. But as Mars is a social planet, the relations with people are even more commonly a source of difficulty. Pains should be taken not to say or do that which causes offense or which leads to strife, unless it has calmly been decided upon that strife is the only proper course to pursue. The domestic thoughts are the natural antidote, and the best way of applying them is merely to interest oneself as thoroughly as possible in helping those who are weak and in distress. This maternal attitude and the action springing from it, if sufficiently encouraged, will generate the thought elements which, if pleasure is felt in them, will combine with the aggressive thoughts in the astral body to form a more fortunate compound. The more such thoughts of helping others tend to displace the discordant thoughts of strife, the more favorable the events which will be attracted by the progressed aspect. Under Mars inner plane weather, cultivate patience and take it easy. So if you have a habit system of being irritated or annoyed all the time, or calling other people names, or kicking the cat, or otherwise, you need to figure out how to have something in your life to take care of. Well, of course, this could have serious ramifications if you're kicking the cat, but nevertheless, you might consider getting a goldfish or a house plant.
When the thing that you're taking care of dies.
Hopefully, it's not another human being, such as a parent, child, or grandparent. In that case, you will probably end up in prison. But let's say it's a death in Bacchia, then you might go out and buy another one and start over again, so that you develop the trait, which it's purely a habit system of how do you become sensitive to another living creature. That's something that's important to develop in this life. How do you become sensitive to and responsible to other life forms?
What's the definition?
Oh, they were big in the 50s too. They were a house plant.
They lasted pretty long.
At least you remembered the word. Jupiter. Progressions attract abundance, opportunities, goodwill, and luck. Here's the really good news. Major progressions of Jupiter last about 11 years. Now, the rub is we tend to pay attention more to the things in our lives that hurt than to the things that don't hurt. The things that don't hurt, we tend to take for granted. So 11 years of something not hurting, we could oftentimes just be accepting it as the natural state that things should be. Whereas under our adverse progressions, we tend to, sit up and pay attention. So under progressed aspects to Jupiter, you actually have to work a little bit harder. But if you do so under those periods of time, you can be continuously reaping in the rewards that planet would bring. If not, it might just be a fairly pain-free period in your life.
If you think about it, your physical body remembers pain a lot longer than it does pleasure too. Like, for example, if you hug somebody, you're only going to feel the hug from that somebody for like 3 seconds.
But if they broke your rib when they hug you,
when they hug you,
you're going to feel it for 3 months at least.
Yeah, maybe even years if it punctured something.
Yeah, a very good example. So under harmonious Jupiter progressions, and usually they are, you have luck, you have opportunities, you have affluence and gain without a whole lot of effort. You have opportunities to be charitable. You can express generosity, faith, and overall you are smitten with feelings of optimism. If it is afflicted, though, it might be a time that you're expressing yourself with a little conceit or arrogance, holier than that attitude. My God is bigger than your God. Religious fanaticism. You could be overly optimistic, which is, I think I'll buy 1,000 lottery tickets. I'm bound to win. And there could be excessive generosity or self-indulgence. In this case, you got the half gallon of Haagen-Dazs. It was on sale.
The gambling and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Trish and I went to the Walgreens across the street and blew all our money on ice cream the other day.
You must have had a Jupiter progression. All right.
Maybe it was just a transit.
Self-indulgence, extravagance, unwise optimism, too great generosity, unwillingness to consider the cost, and unwarranted business expansion are the chief things which an unfavorable progression involving Jupiter tends to attract. All these things are reliance upon chance or the opinions of others. Now, all these things are attracted due to the careful analysis of the situation, the reliance upon chance or the opinion of others, or on the good offices of others, sometimes even too great enthusiasm to present one's religious opinions may cause difficulty. Religion should be a private affair. Keep it to yourself.
Yeah, I left out politics too.
So, yeah, one example of over-optimism is sometimes businesses fail because they're actually being very successful and they think, oh, if instead of 5 stores I have 10, I will be making this much more money. But the environment can't actually bear to have 5 of those stores. And suddenly the overhead and the expense is so great that all of the businesses, which previously had been models, great business models, fail. But whatever the discord that a progressed aspect involving Jupiter brings, basically, it is due to lack of intelligence. That's reassuring. That'll make you feel good.
Higher mind stuff.
The house position of Jupiter and of the other planet involved in aspect indicate the departments of life chiefly affected. But in general, as Jupiter is a business planet, the finances also need attention. And the kind of attention most needed is to cultivate a pleasure in carefully analyzing and appraising by the most conservative methods every transaction which is entered into, especially those indicated by the progressed aspect. In other words, learn to balance your checkbook, please. All right. Progressions involving Saturn attract lack of resources, restrictions, losses, confinement, sorrows, responsibilities. I'm feeling sad. And major progressions of Saturn last 15 or more years. By the end of that, you're so beaten up you want to crawl back in your hole. Yeah, or you've developed a carapace in that amount of time, like a turtle. Now, if they're harmonious, you could have 15 years of planning, organization, and the development of systems. Preparation and safety-mindedness, foresight and prescience, personal discipline and structure, accountability, shouldering duties and responsibilities, and conscientiousness.
Mm-hmm. And this for all my life.
You've been practicing.
Sure.
Now, on the other hand, if it's afflicted, you're going to experience greed, selfishness, prolonged hardships, illness and physical disabilities, heavy responsibilities, losses, poverty, sorrows, grief, depression. Makes you just want to end it right now. All right, the trend of the thoughts under an unfavorable progression involving Saturn is to look upon the dark side of things. Imagine that. The planetary vibrations received by the thought cells at the terminals of the temporary stellar aerial are heavy, morose, self-centered, and lacking in buoyancy and elasticity, imparting to these cells a feeling which causes them to work from the inner plane to attract want, responsibility, and loss. Because Saturn thoughts are so insistently present, weighing down the personality, no special effort is necessary to cause them to associate with the other thoughts and feelings that may be cultivated. Yet social contacts and other Venus activities are of no value unless the lightheartedness and gaiety of Venus are experienced. It may require great fortitude when things apparently are going to pieces, and even social slights and financial losses may be in the offing. To mix with people, to dance, sing, go to the movies, make merry, and take joy in music and art. But there is nothing better to drive away the Saturn blues, and nothing better and to add happy thought elements to safety thought compounds in a manner which most readily transforms them into a dynamic stellar compound which attracts good fortune. Under Saturn inner plane weather, keep your chin up and cultivate cheerfulness. Basically, under Saturn aspects, Venus, the antidote is the social aspects. Has anyone in the room ever been depressed? All right. Yeah. You know what? It's kind of hard to go out to a party when you're feeling that way. And going to a party and having other people talk about the cheerful elements of their lives isn't always going to make you feel better. However, there are other ways to cultivate Venus. And that could be if you play a musical instrument, or just playing music, or if you're involved in a craft or an art form of any kind. The process of sitting with Saturn discipline and working at your art, while you're engaged in that vibration, which is ultimately Venus, time stands still, your problems disappear during that period of time while you're engaged, and it works as an antidote, whereas going to the party might just make you want to drive your car off the cliff on the way home. Yes?
What if you have a square or an opposition between all the planets that are creating an antidote to, a discordant aspect or whatever?
Yes, if the planet that is your antidote is engaged in an affliction to the antidote planet, then you're pretty much left with conversion. The problem with that is, let's say in your natal chart, Venus and Saturn are square or opposition. So tapping into one to try to heal the other isn't always going to work, because the mental compound in there is designed to create struggle and strife and conflict. So that's when you decide that all I can do is convert this. I work on my Saturn, which means I work on becoming a less self-centered, self-absorbed, selfish person. When grasping selfishness or the thoughts of, what's in this for me, come up, I replace them by doing more for another person. The same with Venus. When the thoughts of having my feelings hurt, or nobody loves me, everybody hates me, going to the garden to eat worms, creeps in. Instead, I'm going to stop and learn how to put that to music, and thereby bring the element of beauty into my life. Or while I'm looking for worms in the garden, I'll plant a few flower seeds. So you work at just converting the energy.
Worms are fun.
All right, Uranus is considered to be the upper expression of Mercury. Both govern thinking and the nervous system. The difference is Uranus is not just your rational thinking. Uranus is your brilliant, genius thoughts. So Uranus progressions, they last so long, we're not even going to concern ourselves with.
14 years through one sign.
Right. And by progression, it's a lifetime.
Mine is exactly where it was the day I was born.
Now, Under Uranus progressions, that's when we're having inventions, insights, discoveries. Things come into our life through human agencies, that person who is a catalyst of change. Heightened awareness. Or, if they're discordant, you're expressing a little radical or eccentric behavior. Your opportunities are erratic or unstable. The changes that come to you may be unwanted. And or you could be just having a bout of hyperactivity and somebody's peeling you off the ceiling. Uranus, as octave of Mercury, has direct access to the electromagnetic form through the nerve currents, and its discords tend to unusually high tension of the nervous system and to depletion of electromagnetic energy. In particular, it opens the gate to outside influences, notably those of people who often gain at such times through hypnotic effect, mental influence, or through misplaced confidence, altogether too great control over the life. This is the, Svengali complex. All attachments made during such a progression should be subject to certain reservations. I know I think you're my soulmate, but you just might not be. Yet excellent progress in astrology and the occult sciences can be made even under heavy, unfavorable progressed aspects involving this planet. An aspect involving Uranus favors gaining new information, and as a result of such new information, the viewpoint is often changed.
So how long do these last?
Too long to even measure. If the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, by major progression, oftentimes they're like programs running in the background of your computer. They enter and they remain there for a lifetime if they're within a degree of perfect. So, the natural antidote for an unfavorable Uranus is the same as for an unfavorable Mercury. What has been said as to applying the religious thoughts to counteract a discordant Mercury applies with equal force to transforming a Uranian thought compound into one of more fortunate trend. All right, Neptune progressions involve imagination, visionary ideals, intuition, illusions, fantasy thinking, and psychic sensitivity. I feel I should mention here, and to answer your questions, Laura, is the outer planets, the upper octave planets, as they're moving through the chart, take forever and a day to move. But keep in mind, every aspect we have has 2 or more stellar aerials. So all of the other planets we've mentioned, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, Jupiter, etc., they can move forward and form progressions to the upper octave planets. And that, even though that is not the planet forming the progression, it is one of the 2 planets involved and one of the 4 terminals that's being stimulated. So there are periods where we have these going on that are not lifetime things. So Neptune, imagination, visionary ideals, intuition, illusions, fantasy thinking, and psychic sensitivity. So if it's harmonious, this is going to express as idealism, getting in there and working on your humanitarian goals, having visionary ideas, how to build the better mousetrap, non-killing, heightened intuition, spiritual experiences, increased sensitivity. These are all positive Neptune aspects. However, if they're discordant, you can be subject to schemes, illusions, hypersensitivity, disappointments, confusion, and vagueness. An unfavorable progression involving Neptune requires the same cultivation of the safety thoughts as that prescribed for its octave, Venus. But in addition, because it is so much more negative and sensitive, the power thoughts should receive even more consideration. Courage, stamina, positiveness, and determination are especially required to offset the shrinking sensitiveness and dreaminess which the vibrations of Neptune encourage. You hurt my feelings. I'm not going to speak to you again, because you might hurt them even more. There's a form of shrinking sensitiveness. Such discords tend to attract schemes which work to the detriment of the individual. Imaginary advantages seem unusually attractive and may lead to loss. Yes, I am Simon Okefenoke from Nigeria, and you have been mentioned in my will to receive $2,600,000 US. You know, please contact me.
Just send $2,000
to this so I can start processing the paperwork.
So we can get started.
Exactly. Imaginary advantages seem unusually attractive and may lead to loss.
This goes with men too, opposite sex.
On the other hand, imaginary dangers may harass and require adequate power thoughts to banish. Psychic matters, new habits, even drugs may tend to enslave the person, and poison may affect the health. Yet, even under quite favorable progressed aspects involving Neptune, good progress may be made in music, in fiction writing, or in dramatic work.
In other words, take the next train to Hollywood.
Just don't expect too much. You know, find a good voiceover coach. Just don't give them all your money. Pluto progressions. Progressions involving Pluto attract experiences with compulsion, conformity, obsessions, and group influences.
What do you mean by conformity?
Toe the party line. We want, you know, you are representing us. We want you to fit in.
Okay. Born in Saturn. Okay.
Yeah. The Japanese have a saying, which is, the nail which sticks up must be beaten down.
So this is more the obsessive.
Fit in.
Yeah.
Sit down and fit in. Sit down, shut up, and fit in.
Shoot.
But if it's harmonious, you can be successful in your cooperative efforts, sense of community, positive experiences with groups, awareness of your life purpose, feeling of connectedness. Or, on the other hand, you could be having negative experiences with groups, experiences with compulsion and conformity, obsessions, and or mob influences. I mean, in gangs, in many gangs, one of the initiations is to have to go out and kill someone. That an individual might not ordinarily do that, but because they're under the peer pressure of the group, they feel this conformity of behavior. And mobs will do things that are at times without reason. You know, smashing windows, cars, overturning vehicles, because in a group, people will do things that they otherwise might not do on their own behavior.
You think of it mostly as a deviant behavior.
Yes, unless it's a mob that nowadays, in the last 10 years ago, there have been flash mobs, which can either be smash and grab, mobs that go in and rob jewelry stores, or you'll see, along the Kremlin in Russia, people breaking out into dance, doing, bringing on the Ritz. Or in a shopping mall at Christmas time, suddenly the group is singing Handel's Messiah. These are mob influences, but the end result is a creative process. The group has done something creative rather than smashing the jewelry store windows, grabbing all the jewelry, and running.
So it doesn't have to be deviant.
It doesn't have to be. Only if it's an affliction. If it's harmonious,
To create a mob like that, you have to have at least one person that's leading the whole group that would have done it even if they weren't in the mob. Like with the dancing flash mob, me and my friend Miranda were the ones that came up with the idea, and it took a lot of convincing to get everybody else to join in. So there has to be somebody who would just do that on their own anyway, aka me.
Although sometimes the energy of the group can spur, even the leader to come up with something that they wouldn't have planned or come up. I'm flashing on the sports team that gang-banged the drunken girl at the party, and the friends who were
taking photos.
Pictures and putting them on Facebook. I mean,
Here's my crime. Would you like to see it? It'll help when you decide to prosecute me.
I can't believe they're showing mercy to those D-bags on the news.
yeah, there's been a lot of objection to the way CNN sympathized with the poor boys whose lives will be ruined from this without...
And nothing of the girl.
With the girl, yeah. I mean, I've gotten several emails around commenting to CNN on that. Yeah, this is still...
And that is a cultural problem. Yeah.
It is. But that tends to be going on.
and
That's
blame the
negative.
victim.
Overrules the positive.
She shouldn't have worn the cheerleading
That's right.
outfit to the party.
Yeah, and got
It's-
so drunk she couldn't move or speak.
You should have
Right.
got so drunk that she didn't know what she was doing.
Yeah.
And so this is what's
There's no
prevailing.
excuse for rape.
This is
That's
going
right.
on and on and on in more than just that situation, I think.
Oh, yeah, it is a cultural
Right,
problem.
it is a problem.
And that is a discordant Pluto.
Right.
And it's even in the schools because whenever they're talking about rape to students, they don't say, don't rape people, they say how not to be raped. It's just stupid.
It's interesting.
Training
This is
people
the
to be
only
victims.
city I've ever been in that has a billboard, and it's on Cole, coming this way. And there is a picture of a girl, and the guy is taking her to his apartment. To an apartment, and it says, "Just because you take her home, don't be the guy that goes to jail," or whatever. So I assume it means don't rape her. And I have never ever seen that billboard, even in LA or Atlanta, or maybe it's new, but it's like, wow, don't be the guy that something. And you get
Don't be the guy that takes advantage of
that takes advantage of her, basically. But however they say it, it's like, wow.
Finally, they're giving the guy some responsibility instead of
really.
just blaming the victim.
Yeah, but anyway.
That really is a good example for Pluto, though.
All right.
On the better side.
Yes, on the better side, Pluto has to do with soulmates. And it's on the adverse side with weaknesses due to separation. Unusual discrimination is required while an unfavorable progression of Pluto is operative. That contact with the criminal world of both planes be avoided. Kidnapping or becoming the tool of invisible or racketeers, visible or invisible racketeers, should especially be guarded against. Such things at times are present in slight degree without being recognized. Association with groups of doubtful character and situations that might lead to coercion should be avoided.
So this could be cult stuff.
Absolutely. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. Thank you very much. Just because everyone else is drinking it.
Don't be a lemming.
As my mother used to say, if everyone was jumping off a bridge, would you do it? It's like, all right, Mom.
If there's a bungee cord.
The aggressive thoughts as natural antidotes should be applied under unfavorable progressions involving Pluto in precisely the same manner advocated for unfavorable progressions involving the moon. So stand up and do something about it. Don't become passive to the influence of the group. Yeah.
I just think it was aggression might make the situation more violent. I mean, do you know what I mean?
They've actually found out that people who stand up in groups can actually, by being assertive, you can deflect the direction that the group might otherwise go. This is especially in the case of bullying and...
It doesn't work all the time, though. You know, like even with that rape case, there was one kid who actually stood up and said, no, this isn't right, and everybody just chased him out. So...
Right, the difference is he probably didn't go to jail with the rest of them. So...
There are sacrificial lambs and such. It
Yeah.
isn't always a happy outcome for the person who goes against the group.
No, it isn't. But
That's what. Well, it's an energetic thing too. If the energy's this way, and you have to. I mean, I don't know. I used to teach schools in ghettos, and if they did this, you had to come with an equal force, not violence, but really that your confidence or your aggressiveness was the same, and then it would neutralize. But if I was weaker or over, they'd come right in. So I think that's probably what they're talking
That sounds like a martial arts
about.
lesson.
yeah. Okay, sample chart. It was actually his birthday last week on the 14th, but one of my favorite people. Albert Einstein, the theoretical physicist who developed the theory of relativity. E equals mc squared. So, what I'm going to do is now move from the podium to the laptop, and let's pull up his chart and look for specific periods of progressions. Okay.
What time was that? We have an example. What time was that in his life? Did he do something?
Probably, but since I don't have it open yet in front of me, I won't be able to answer that for you.
Sorry, I thought it was all right here because they were all.
It was 2 or 3 weeks ago when I prepared it, but
Progression date here is 4/18/1955.
that's when he died. So just give me a moment, and why? Darn.
Right, he could not have a Capricorn Ritter with such passing.
Seventh house at 2655.
To his friends, he was really nebulous. His moon's on
Okay, I'm going to have to enter this because I can't find. the chart. So,
Do you need this information?
you could just read it to me. I can.
The date, we've got the date. The time is 11:30 a.m. LMT.
What was the year of his birth? 18.
11:30 a.m.
LMT, what is that?
Local mean time.
Okay. The place, I don't know if I can pronounce it.
Ulm in Baden-Württemberg.
Germany.
Württemberg.
Is it Württemberg?
Württemberg.
Württemberg?
Okay, you see how you're going to pronounce this here is you're going to change the W into an
And that was
vowel.
AM?
The
Yes,
U
yes,
is going to be an
11:30
elongated
a.m.
vowel because of the two dots over it. So that's ver, tem, berg, Württemberg.
Baden-Württemberg, Germany. Württemberg,
They have a German accent. They used to do D instead.
Berg is
That
Burg.
doesn't.
Oh, it is?
But it's like
They
a
don't
D.
do the TH sound, but they do say V for W.
Okay, so let's look at a couple of different events. In 1903, January,
That was relative. That was the release of the paper for relativity.
You dropped that bomb on this bomb on
okay. Sun conjunct Venus. He got married.
You're right.
You were right.
How did you know that, Michelle?
Who said that? Did you say that? They got married? You did, right. That was right.
Yeah, he married Mileva Mark.
Maybe there's something.
So,
Was that the same woman who quietly collaborated with developing lots of his theories?
Wasn't she a teenager?
Or was she
I think she was.
not his wife, but a scientific cohort?
I can't answer any of your questions, but I can tell you in January 1903 he
He got
married.
married.
And the name of the woman he married.
All right, good enough. Christine.
So
We
there's
want the nitty gritty.
There's one example of an aspect. If we're looking for a marriage, we're either looking for progressions involving the seventh house, which would be progressions either to Mars or Saturn, or we're looking for progressions that involve Venus, because Venus is our feelings of affection. So I would say when they married, they were probably giddy in love. Now, whether it lasted after the aspect went out of orb, we don't know. But at least,
I had that aspect, Venus and Sun, just like that, when I was 5. And my mother married my stepfather, who adopted me. And I said, until I was in my 30s, when Mother and I married Billy. I mean, and everybody said, he said, oh yeah, he's my dad. I mean,
yeah.
it was that kind of thing. But I used to say that when Mother and I married Billy.
When he quit playing violin, that was it.
Was that Nero?
Set everything on fire.
Okay. Let's look at another aspect in Einstein's life, which will be December 10th, 1921. We go to the progress the chart to,
Skip right over the release of the special relativity paper, for heaven's sake.
You want it. You want it out.
probably,
Actually, the paper that he wrote it, that he was most famous for, he wrote it at the end of his life.
Well, he was very famous for a few.
Yeah, I know,
papers,
but I'm just saying the whole
Came on the
Princess
map.
Square thing, he wrote that right before he died.
all right, on December 10th, 1921, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics. So, what would determine prizes in a chart? 10th house? any aspects to the sun, aspects involving Jupiter, because what comes with the Nobel Prize? It's not just a tidy little medal. You get money. You get a cash reward with that. So look at the progressed sun, 5 Taurus, 2 Jupiter, 6 Pisces. And again, the Nobel Prize is a foreign prize, 9th house. So under this highly favorable aspect involving the power urges, which have to do with self-esteem, awards, recognition, accomplishments, and Jupiter, which is...
Jupiter, Mars, and Jupiter.
Yeah,
What do you think about that, too?
There you have it. You've got another
the higher mind.
aspect in orb as well. All right, let's move this forward to 1933.
Are progressions more powerful when they're aspecting another progression or they aspect something in the chart?
Doesn't matter. Okay, in 1933, Einstein visited the U.S. and did not return to Germany when Hitler came to power.
Yeah, Mars.
So what are we going to look for? What about something... Oh, and I didn't even write an aspect for this. Huh. But if we look at it, if it would be the home, which is either the 4th house or the moon. He was receiving his second lunar return at that time. The moon had gone back to 14 Sagittarius. So his workplace and his home environment changed. With the 4th house of home and homeland and nation being ruled by Mercury, let's see if there's any Mercury aspects. Mercury's at 22 Aries. So it's forming a semi-sextile to the sun in the 10th house at 23 Pisces. So he would have changed his nation under this favorable aspect to Mercury and the sun.
There's also an aspect between Mercury and Venus in the 12th house of institutions.
Very good. And look, Venus is squaring the sun in the 10th house. So Venus in the 12th house of institutions squaring the sun could also show what might befall him had he returned to Germany, that he could have been put in one of those, yes. Yeah, one of those lovely secret camps. And now we'll go back to the aspect which you all have on your page, which is it was progressed to April 18th. I found this curious, especially after 2 weeks ago when we did Piet Mondrian. If you remember, he died when he had progressed progressed Mars conjuncting his natal sun. The same happened with Einstein. So here, we've only looked at 2 charts that have had this aspect, but I just found it curious preparing for this chart that Mars passing over the natal sun in some people's charts can be so volatile or so powerful as to bring infection, inflammation, accident, injury, heart attack. I do not remember how he died. We collectively might know, but...
The moon is also in the 4th house at the same degree as the moon is in his natal chart. It forms a sextile, so that it's in the 4th house.
which is the end of things. And we might look for a Saturn aspect, since Saturn rules the 8th house. But I'm not seeing,
That's interesting, though. I mean,
curiously, I'm not seeing a Saturn aspect, but there could be a semi-square or sesqui-square to Saturn. That's just not visible at this time.
let me ask you this, Christopher. If they both died with the Sun and Mars, because that's the first thing I saw in this chart. Is it saying something? I don't know where the other guy's was with the house, but it's the 10th house. So, you know, as she said, if he did his best work right at the end and wrote this paper, did this kind of cement him as a authority in any way? I mean, because I always think of Mars as giving the Sun more vitality, as opposed to death, unless there's severance.
Because of things that he did
Mars
at the end of
can
his
count.
life, he was never forgotten through history.
Yeah, he may have burnt himself out at the end. We know Mondrian was doing that. Does anyone have the notes from 2 weeks ago where we have...
Now Pluto is in trine with Mars, and Mars is conjunct the 8th house.
Mondrian died in what, 43?
February 1st of 44.
Okay, so February 1st. Now, normally we would think of, so the Sun and Mars were conjunct in the 3rd house at that time by progression. In Einstein's case, the progressed Mars was sitting on top of the natal Sun. Normally, we think of the Sun and Mars when they're conjoined as being particularly energizing, but one could be burning the candle at both ends at this point in their life, and yeah, or just have an accident because you've been up all night figuring out E equals MC what, and you trip down the stairs or something. Barb.
Fred Michelson, on April 17th, 1955, Albert Einstein experienced internal bleeding caused by the rupture of a aortic aneurysm.
There you have it.
55.
So think of the Sun, Mars as a,
So the progression date is 1955. The 4th, 18th, 1955.
Yeah, the day before.
right, the day before he had an aneurysm and he died the following day.
Thank you, Fred Michael.
Thanks, Fred Michael.
And the sun has to do with the heart.
Does an aneurysm make the artery explode?
Basically, a aneurysm is a ballooned artery. So that burst, yeah. So there is an example of another chart and other progressions. And that takes us to the end of class. So next week, tonight is actually Rosie O'Donnell's birthday, so we'll be looking at her chart next week. So, yeah, an outspoken Aries woman. So that's it for tonight. We're going to do more alchemy next week. We're going to apply this a little further and look at another chart. Thanks for coming, all of you.